Over the last few episodes on the Just Create SMP, I have been turning this huge landscape into a desolate wasteland surrounding what's going to be a huge cyberpunk city. Down underneath this plate there's a slum city part of the area. We've got a train docking station here that connects to a train line that runs around the entire world. We've got a huge crane that picks up containers and moves them around, and we've even got a magnet crane that I built in the last episode that's going to be picking up scrap and junk from a big old junk pile over here and distributing it around the area around it. And this area around it is all going to take the form of a scrapyard full of broken down old vehicles and junk, a whole bunch of which I spent some time in the last episode designing. These vehicles, we've got a whole bunch of different types ranging from cars to buses to trucks to pickups and forklifts, even tractors, and we've got trains, subway trains, we've got broken down drones and even some gondola cars. We've got a whole bunch of things to choose from, and while I might not be using every single one of these in the scrapyard, I actually need some more. That's because in the lore of my cyberpunk city, we go from a desolate wasteland where we've got these oil-burning, chugging, horrible smoky machines to things that are a little bit more futuristic and modern, to hyper-futuristic, where we're going to be having floating monorails and hover cars all the way up to having flying cars and vehicles right at the very top. And because the scrap pile that's going directly below this thing is going to be primarily fed from the people that are just chucking their old junk off the edge of this plate and down onto it, it would make sense that a bunch of the scrap that's going to be coming down here actually consists of some of those more futuristic vehicles. And currently all of the vehicles that I've created in my test world are not particularly futuristic. The only one that is a hover vehicle is the broken down old version of the drone you've just seen whizzing around that world, and perhaps the dystopian cyberpunk subway train that's taken a bit of a battering over time. But in all of those things, there are no hover trains, there's no hover cars, there are no flying cars, and that is exactly what I want to design now. Now, it might seem a little bit preemptive designing flying vehicles for an area of my world that I haven't even built yet, but in order to complete the scrapyard below, I really need the lore to connect and it all to make sense once the entire thing's complete. So I think it makes sense to get those things designed now, get a whole bunch of them all broken down and thrown down into here so we can finish this area off, or at least finish off the scrapyard, and then we can move on to other things like perhaps finishing the slums area of my city or even starting the next layer of our plate. Now, there are other things that I want to do in this desolate wasteland. I actually want to build a scavenger market over in this area here. I need to build the areas over here where we're going to be having a big market and food stalls and things like that, and even a power substation. And I need to design a way for people to get from outside of the city up to the plate level up there. And I do have some ideas for that, but that's all going to happen a little bit later on, because today the focus is the scrapyard and getting that oh yeah, I need a furnace recycle center as well, but that's gonna have to wait too, because I don't have time to do all of those things today. So let's get cracking designing my first futuristic flying / hover vehicles. Which brings me straight back to my test world, where I'm gonna need a whole bunch of Copycat blocks, as well as a whole bunch of interesting looking blocks to texture these things and make them look more futuristic. And then we can create versions of them that are all broken down and rusted and horrible like these things. So let's hop over here where we've got some space and start placing some blocks. But actually, before we start placing any blocks, let's talk a little bit about my inspiration for these vehicles, as well as a few of the limitations we're going to face. Now, as we can see from this motorbike build here, it is pretty big. It's much bigger than an actual motorbike in real life, and that's because even though we've got Copycat blocks, such as this bite block and even this corner slice block, whilst these are relatively small, we can't have multiple of them in the same block. We can only grow the one that exists. Now, we could have 4 of them together like that on different blocks, but that means we can't place anything else in those blocks as well. So we're still limited by the actual block space of Minecraft, meaning things have to be generally a little bit bigger than they would be in real life in order to actually make them look like what we want them to look like. Now, another limitation we're going to face today is something I haven't had to worry about for any of these vehicles, and that is that the vehicles that we design today are actually going to have to be able to move. They're going to need to be fake trains that run on invisible tracks. That means they're going to have invisible bogies sat within them. It also means that they're going to need at least one seat, and it means they're going to need at least one set of train controls, which already makes this initial structure relatively big because it'll have to be able to fit at least a player or an entity in it as well to drive them around. So these flying vehicles are going to have to be relatively large, but I actually want to keep them as small as possible. And that brings me to my inspiration. And this might seem a little odd, but I really like the design of the Star Wars A-Wing. I think these, with a little bit of neon stuff sticking to them and the right textures, could end up looking just like the sort of thing I want to have flying around my city. They have a relatively simple design, they should be reasonably easy to throw together with Copycat blocks, and if we type in Google futuristic flying car, you can see they all have similar sort of looks. They've got a sloped area, a glass area, they've got a sort of curved, slopey, nice looking shape, and some even have little rotors and things like that. So that's where I want to start, but I don't know how I'm going to make that small and fit around this chunky mess. So what I'm about to do might be a complete waste of time and end up nowhere, but I'm going to try my very best to actually do some of this placing blocks and building vehicles on camera. So I suppose we should probably start with our invisible track. We should probably then throw a station onto it and put it in create new train, and we should probably throw down at least one invisible bogey to give us a build point to start with. Now, because we want the pivot point on this to probably be roughly where the person is going to be sitting to control it, we'll put the seat directly on top of that. We'll grab a Copycat slab and place that down there and stick some train controls on it, ideally facing in the right direction there. So if we continue these slabs around here like this, we want this thing to be at least 3 blocks wide because that's going to give us plenty of room each side to actually add some detail. I think we need to come forward a few blocks so that when we actually grab our slopes and start throwing these things in, we actually have room to bring the slope up beyond or above our train controls, and ideally even over the top of our player as well. But these blocks, these slope blocks, can't float on a half slab. They can't be placed above a slab like that. They can only go onto the next block layer. So if we're going to give the person who sat here enough headroom, we actually need the slope that's going to be above them to be at that level there, and that means we need to bring that one up to match. And already that's a bit of a weird, steep looking slope. In order to get this more reasonable, we actually need to bring this entire thing down to the next layer, which means if we want our vehicle to start at the very beginning from a slope, it's going to have to be quite long before it even gets to the driver. But that doesn't mean we can't end the vehicle relatively quickly. We can have the back of it relatively close to where the player or the driver is going to be sat. But the next problem is, unlike the framed blocks mod, Copycat slopes don't have corner slopes. We can't have slopes going up in a corner. That means when we're doing slopes, like on this car here, we can't go up at the corner and make it look flat. We have to have sort of some square edge jankiness, which does fit the Minecraft aesthetic, but it doesn't necessarily give you the exact flexibility you might want for your design. So let's just follow these slopes up where we've already got them for now, and that can be the very start or the basis of our curve, which currently doesn't look very good at all. Now, what we can do is actually have slopes going in the other direction, so we can have slopes underneath, creating a proper little wedge at the front there like that, and we could probably bring this down to the next slab level, but I can't bring this one in at a shallower angle because it's a different kind of slope. Before it gets to the point where it becomes a slab on the bottom, I can change the angle of it, but as soon as it gets to full slope, all you're doing is changing the front level here, which is not necessarily ideal. Whilst I could maybe flatten the slope off a bit by doing that, it means the front ones have to be significantly deeper as well. And now we look like we're building more of a boat than a flying car. But I suppose flying cars are probably designed in a similar way to boats, so let's give that a go. And taking a quick look back at our inspiration, this really isn't looking much like an A-Wing, and I don't know how we're going to manage that to keep it so flat at the front and then just pop up in the middle, but all I can do is try. So moving on slightly from that one to another one, this has a little bit more of a reasonable shape. It's a little bit more squished at the front than I'd like, and we're having to make good use of our imaginations to actually assume this is a continuous slope rather than just a bunch of square little bits, but I think it has more of the sort of carriagey 8-wing look that I was looking for. But things are going to get a little bit tricky as we get towards the back, where I need to put in like the thruster bits and the wingy bits that stick up. So let's just bring out some wings to the side. And yes, when you place Copycat slabs, the last one you place is always invisible, which is really annoying. In fact, we'll just fill out this entire area on the inside for now, like that. And now you can see this is already 5 blocks wide, which is a lot wider than I want it to be and a lot wider than any of the vehicles that I've made down here. But it's what we've got and it's how it's going to have to be. We're just going to have wide air roads. Are they called air roads where they fly around? I don't know. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Now this bit at the back is going to basically continue down until it gets to, I guess, round about here-ish, roughly. And we can slowly bring that back. Maybe we'll put that there, or a Copycat layer in the middle there. Then we need some slopes for the sides a little bit like this. And then it sort of juts back in at this point where we have more of the thrustery bits that come back. And then they have the sort of wings that stick up off the top of that. Well, they're not wings. I don't know what they're called. The vertical wings. These bits, stabilizers, that of course you need when you're in space because of all the air resistance and the wind resistance that's pushing your ship around in the vacuum of space. Now, just bear in mind, I don't need this to look exactly like an A-wing. Being inspired by something doesn't mean you're trying to copy it exactly. It just means you're using it as a basis for your initial reference. It's the idea that sparks your own imagination to create something unique yourself. Right, anyway, Copycat panes might not be a bad thing to use at this point. We can actually add those along here like this. Bring those thrusters even further back. This thing's getting massive. Jeez. And then they sort of have some more of those on the underside of these thrusters, and those ones are actually a little bit longer, something like that. And then, of course, these thrusters actually have a magical gap on them. A little bit like that. Now, there is still a whole bunch of stuff going on in the middle on these, so I think we've started our slope too early, but that kind of works. At least for the top half. We just need to make it all work for the bottom as well. Ooh, I've gone in it. Okay, now it looks kind of close to what I wanted it to look like. I do feel like it's a little bit thin at the back, and I guess it looks more like a submarine from James Bond than an A-wing, but I think you can see what I'm getting at. Now, I think some Copycat slices will help us out a little bit here. We can add a bit more detail with something like these. Give it a little bit more of that shape that we're looking for. We do something similar at the back there, just to sort of bring that back around a little bit. We could even run some of those across there like that. It just adds a little bit more interest there. And we could do something like adding some guns to the front of this thing, but I don't think we need guns on our flying cars in our cyberpunk city. It's not really the vibe I'm going for. Although I do kind of like that. I think I'm going to add them on this side as well. And yes, this thing's going to kill many of the poor people that live in the slums below. Maybe it could be a police vehicle. Looks a little bit too spaceship to be a police vehicle, though, I think. But anyway, I think it's about time that I actually started throwing some textures into this thing and figure out what we can actually make it look like. Because right now, it's quite difficult to see or feel exactly what this is going to be like while it's just a mess of Copycat-looking blocks. So for now, let's just give the entire thing a silvery dark metal plating look, and then we can worry about colours and design and jazzy stuff like that once we've got everything filled in. And there we go, that already makes it look a whole bunch better than it did. Now we've got some stray Copycat blocks in here that we don't need, so let's get rid of those. Then I can put that one back there, retexture that and make those the glass again. That looks a little bit better. There's still some stray ones in there, but that's absolutely fine. And I'm thinking maybe we should actually move the seat and controls back one block as well. So let me just smash my way into here. Let's get rid of everything that we don't need on the inside because they're just wasted blocks. And let's move that seat back a block, move the controls back a block. And let's get rid of that stray one in there as well. Now we can put all of that back together again. But we do still need a way for the driver to get in and out of this. But I think that's one of those things where we're going to have to use our imagination again and just assume that this thing actually lifts off and allows the driver to get in and out, because I really don't see how we're going to be able to do that using the tools we've got available to us in Create. There we go, I kind of like the look of that. Looks very sort of futuristic Starfighter-y. Now it just needs some colour. Perhaps we can have a blue stripe going up the middle of this thing. Do the same thing down the back here. Now, these thrustery bits at the back don't look very thrustery, and I don't really like how we've got these flappy bits here. So I'm wondering, rather than using those, if something like these would be better, because they're similar. Okay, this thing's growing on me slightly. I'm kind of liking where we're going with this, but it's more of a warship than a futuristic flying car that, well, real civilians might be flying around the area. So while I am going to keep this and use it, I'm also now going to spend some time trying to come up with a few more slightly less dangerous looking designs. Well, it turns out making flying cars is pretty tricky. Let me talk you through what I've done and why I'm not overly impressed or happy with what I've come out with. First of all, we started with this, which just looks like even more of a Starfighter than that one, although it doesn't have any weapons. It certainly doesn't look like a flying car, the sort of thing you might find flying around a cyberpunk city. So I thought, what about the DeLorean, the ultimate flying car? So I made a very boxy, short, squat version of that, because I absolutely love the DeLorean. It's one of my favourite cars, well, the one from Back to the Future at least. And then I thought, what about a taxi? We're going to need taxis up there. So we've got this hover taxi, which again came out a little bit squat and a little bit strange, but I've done my best. And then I thought, what about a bit more of a sporty car? So we've got this one here with the go faster stripes. We've got the little bit that comes out the bonnet, the air intake, and it's even got a couple of little sporty hatchback spoilers on there. And this one's using thrusters, the portable storage interface, to keep it afloat. And you can tell that they're using thrusters because it's orange, which is obviously the colour of the thrust coming from the thrusters, because that's how thrusters work. The taxi also has the same sort of thing going on, although it doesn't actually have the portable storage interfaces because it doesn't need them. And then I thought, well, that's sort of a modern sporty hatchback, but what about a more classic hot roddy type sports car? And that's when I came up with this one, which is a lot more glowy, a lot more green, a lot more boxy, but you can tell by these grates on the front that it has a much bigger engine, and because it's got more orange glowy things on the bottom, it must obviously be a lot more powerful and faster. Of course, that's how it must work. This one actually has the portable storage interfaces facing towards these angled bits to force the thrust down as well as a little bit forward, and it's also got one round the back as well, so this thing will go very fast, and that spoiler will obviously help it stick to the ground while it's flying through the air, because that's what spoilers do. Of course, this is all just fantasy, it's all completely made up, and I think we've got a reasonable start, at least for now, to add these to our scrapyard. But unfortunately, because they're all so shiny and new, we're going to now have to completely scruff them up so they fit with the scrapyard aesthetic. So that means I'm going to take a schematic of all of these, reprint them into the world, and just texture them with all of the grimy, horrible things we've got over here. Mainly the weathered iron and the weathered iron blocks, as well as muds and soul sands and things like that. Now, a lot of you may have already commented on my last video when I made these, but that video's not out yet, so I don't know, that all of the vehicles still have glass in them. them, and realistically on a scrapyard all of the glass would have been removed, and also they would have had some form of damage and things will have been removed as well. You're absolutely right. But this test world is for the complete versions of the car. When we actually start piling them up onto the real world, we can start removing things and getting rid of things and make them look a lot more damaged. But this test world is my starting point so that I know what they should look like, and when I copy them into the world, everything's there, and then I can remove whatever we don't want. So that's why they've all still got all their glass, they've all still got all of their lights, and they're all not missing any blocks. Anyway, right, let's get these copied into the world, dirtied up, and then we can finally build our scrapyard. First things first, I need to just grab a schematic of all of these things. It doesn't need to be particularly accurate because I'm not going to be using this for anything else other than just copying these, and I need to make sure every single block is within inside that area, which it does seem to be, so let's grab that. We'll call it draft hovercars, and we're going to immediately upload that so that we can literally just paste it straight into the world without having to worry about, well, uploading it to the schematic table and printing it in with the cannon. Now we can just print those in like that, get rid of that schematic, grab myself a handful of scabby looking blocks, and then all I've got to do is go round, delete all of the textures from all of the blocks that already exist in these things, getting rid of all of that horrible nasty neon which wouldn't be glowing anymore. And then once the majority of the blocks have been deleted, I can replace the glass with the orange blocks, although this isn't the same as that one. I think I used a different orange block for those. I did. In fact, I think I used brown stained framed glass. That looks more like what I used for the other one. Yeah, that's loads better. Then we can replace that one. We can replace that one. I believe that should be glass as well, and so should that one that's gone missing. That one. Then I can get rid of the glass, turn on shuffle mode, delete any of the main blocks that still exist, and then just go to town, adding all of these things in, as the shuffle mod nicely shuffles it all for me, making everything look all kinds of worn down, broken and gross. And there we go, that's the majority of the texturing redone, apart from the wheels, which obviously would also be a nasty sort of scabby mess. So let's have a couple of them as the crate blocks, and we'll throw a couple of them as the weathered iron to make them look like they've fully deteriorated. We don't have a different type of texture for these diagonal girders, so they'll have to stay, but we do have weathered iron portable storage interfaces, so I can swap these out for some more dirty looking ones of those. And because these are going to be just in the scrapyard and not flying around and turned into trains, we don't need the controls, we don't need the seats, we don't need the bogies, and that means I can just fill up all of the empty space inside with random blocks. Now, to make the lights look more old and worn, what I actually used for those was some of this orange stone metal. So let's come back over to our DeLorean and get rid of the textures for where the lights are and shove these ones on instead. And yes, the lights would have probably been removed when they're on the scrapyard, but don't forget, I need the complete model to schematic it in, and then we can remove whatever we want in the scrapyard. And the other thing we need to consider is some of these won't be quite as old and worn and rusted as this one. Some of them might be slightly less worn and rusted. And that's where these other types come along, where we've used the stone metal to try and make these just look a little bit older than they were rather than really old. And because these are the hover cars from the upper city, these are less likely to just be really old and rusty and dirty. And in reality, the DeLorean was made of stainless steel, which shouldn't rust anyway, so this definitely wouldn't look like this. But again, don't forget, this is Minecraft, this is my world, this is my vision, I do whatever I want, so shut up, leave me alone. But also, send me a comment telling me how wrong I've done it so I can get all upset and angry about it later on and moan about you to my friends. There we go, that's that one now done. Next, it's time for the taxi, and now that's done, so I guess it's probably time we did the hot rod. What an old and broken looking vehicle it is. Oh my goodness. Right, okay, now for the fighter jets that I really don't know if I'm going to use these in the city. Let me know what you think, whether we should be having these flying cars, he says in air quotes, flying around the top half of our city, or if maybe we should move to space and do some form of Star Wars themed build. There we go, that's that one done, so it's just this one to go. I was only joking about moving to space. I just meant tell me if you think we should use these flying car spaceships in the upper part of the city. But I suppose we won't know the answer to that until we start building up there, and these could be completely inappropriate. I just want to know if you like them. Jeez. Anyway, smashy time again. And there we go, that one's done as well. So now all of our new floaty vehicles are all scabby and rusty and dirty. I need to take a schematic of each one, make making sure I've got everything included. Save it and just do exactly the same for the rest of them. And there we go. That's all of the rusty schematics saved. I haven't saved any of these. And because I've now got a schematic of every single one of these rusty cars, vans, trains and whatnot in this world, I will be uploading those onto my Discord server for patrons and YouTube channel members. So if you want to get hold of those and retexture them to use in your world, then maybe send me some pictures of what they look like once you finish tweaking with them, and I might be able to add that to my world later on when we start adding in some non-rusty ones. Anyway, right, next thing I want to do before we head back to the main world is explain how I'm going to turn these rusty cars into a scrapyard, because at the moment they're just individual cars. So first thing I've done is grabbed a few schematics of some of the cars that I've made, and I've placed down a whole bunch of dirt path over here. So now what I can do is I can grab the vehicles that I want to use, put them into the position where I want them, and then print those into the world. And imagine I'm doing this in the real world with the schematic cannon, then I can grab the next car, and because in Scrapyard you tend to have cars piled on top of each other, we might move that about a bit so it looks like it's a little bit more balanced, maybe even move it down inside that other car which doesn't quite look right, and then print that into the world, and then we can grab the next one and do exactly the same thing, basically stacking up big teetering piles of cars, and we'll make lanes and sort of alleyways with them so that there's a whole bunch of them stuck together. So let's throw that one in there. Let's grab the next one, which would be that one, and just pop that down a little bit. And this is basically what we're going to be going for. Something like this. That one I put in the wrong place, but we'll be able to have stacks of vehicles that we'll be able to tidy up and make look nicer with other blocks and things so they don't look like they're just floating on top of each other. But there are going to be a bunch of limitations. We can't, for example, flip any upside down because with schematics, as much as you can rotate them horizontally and you can mirror them, you can't flip them upside down. The only way we'd be able to do that would be to glue them together, grab ourselves a mechanical bearing and a valve, and then we'll be able to... Oh, jeez, I didn't put it on. You're supposed to set it on only place when anchor destroyed first. But yeah, if they're permanently shifted around, it doesn't work at all. Let's try that again. Car, glue, mechanical bearing, only place when anchor destroyed. And now, as we spin this round, we can actually spin it in any direction we want. But when you do this, the mechanical bearing has to stay. As soon as you break it, it then sets those blocks, and as we've just discovered, when you break it and it's in the wrong angle, all of the blocks break and it doesn't look much like a car spun on its side anymore. You can get better angles with it, you can do whatever angle you want, but what we can't do is have it spun, say, that way, and then put another one on there and spin it in another direction as well. We can only spin it in one orientation at once. If we put this to only place near initial angle and spin it roughly back round to where it started, that'll become blocks in the world again, and then we could place a different bearing somewhere else and do exactly the same thing, throw a valve on there, and then we can spin it in a different orientation, which we will be doing for some of the vehicles, but I'm not going to do that for every single vehicle, because as soon as you glue them together and spin them around or move them about, they become an entity, and too many entities in your world means your world starts getting all kinds of laggy. And because we're going to be having so many vehicles in my scrapyard, I don't want it to completely lag out the world. So one way we can make this look better is just to keep them as blocks in the world, and then using a selection of other blocks around them, we can sort of pile up piles of junk nearby just to sort of disguise the fact that some of them look a little bit floaty and straight. And by doing that with barrels and crates and all those sorts of things, we'll be able to make the entire area look a lot more like a scrapyard and less just like a whole bunch of blocks sat on top of each other weirdly floating. And back on the world, all of that is going to take a very long time. So, because I've got to get this video uploaded, out and ready to you by tomorrow afternoon, because I'm going on holiday the next day, I think you should probably now prepare for quite a long and detailed time-lapse. Let's do this. Cutting this time-lapse short, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is I really like what I've done with this so far. I think it's looking absolutely great. We've got a higgledy-piggledy mess of the larger vehicles, a whole bunch of barrels and dirt and things, and I've even put in little spots where people might be camping out here and, you know, sleeping rough. And we've got one there with a little fire inside of a bin. We've got another one here inside of this overturned bus. And altogether, I think it's come out really, really well. The bad news is I'm currently in a creative copy of the world. And the reason for that is that I thought, well, it'd be much easier for me to just put it all together here and then gather all of the materials I need between episodes and blast the entire thing into the real world in the next episode. Because I mentioned I've completely run out of time because I'm going on holiday very soon. And that's not necessarily the bad news. The bad news is, because I've used mechanical bearings to twist a whole bunch of these things on their sides and on angles, when I take a schematic of it, all of those things are going to disappear. And this is what we get, which I kind of like the look of, but it's missing half of the stuff I've put in there. And if I then go and paste this into the real world with a schematic cannon, and then add all of the things in that I've put on angles, it's going to ruin all of the work that I've done underneath it because I've put them on angles and then placed blocks underneath because they're RGs. So basically, I've got to start again, which sucks so much because that's just taken me about 2 hours. Now in creative mode, however, it does work. I can actually place this schematic down wherever I want it, and because I'm in creative mode and not using a schematic cannon, it will actually paste all of the entities in, which is lovely, but it doesn't do that in survival, which is not quite so lovely. But I guess at least I can look at this as a guide of where I need to place everything, and hopefully it won't take too long and shouldn't look too dissimilar from this when I do it properly. Well, it's now the next day and I'm on the server. I have done it. I have brought everything over to the server and it looks pretty much just about as it did on the creative copy of the world. I have made a few changes. I've actually smashed in a few more of the vehicles to make them look a little bit more worn down and broken, and obviously all of the blocks and everything are not quite in the same place as they were before, but I've tried to get it as accurate to the original as possible, and I think I've just about nailed it. So that's the good news. The bad news is I'm quickly running out of time, so I don't know how much of the rest of it I'm going to get done before I've got to stop. So there's no time like the present. Let's do this. Well, this isn't going quite how I'd hoped. Right now we have a bit of a mess. What I did was print a line of 5 cars at the bottom and then attempt to print a line of cars above it with the view that I would then use something like pistons or bearings to turn the top ones into entities, push them down and make them look like they're actually resting on them. However, the problems then occurred when I tried to move this one down. Even though only the top section was glued, it caused some major problems with all of the other blocks on there and I couldn't actually get it down close enough, which is a bit of a problem. The only thing I think I might be able to do to rectify this and actually get it doing what I want it to do is to glue it together again, a little bit like that, and then instead of trying to manipulate it with pistons and bearings, maybe turn it into like a minecart contraption, and then hopefully gravity will allow it to fall on top of this car, but I don't think that's how it's going to work. But let's try. For that, I'm going to need a cart assembler, I'm going to need some rail, I'm of course going to need a minecart, and hopefully I can get this into a position where I can pick it up relatively easily and then hide the minecart after. So if I was to break that block there, pop a full-size block there instead, stick some rail on that, put the cart assembler on there into lock rotation, put the minecart down, then I'm going to probably need to move this block so that I can then power that. That's going to turn that into a contraption. I can then pick it up, which gets rid of it, as well as the blocks on top of this, but that's fine. And then perhaps if I was to put the rail, let's say, on there instead, and then pop that down, that kind of works. Because this is a contraption, it can just sit on top of other blocks. In fact, it can even go through them. If I was to pick that up again and break that block and put the rail there and then put the contraption there, as much as I'm stuck inside it, you can see it will go through other blocks. So that's the way I think we're going to have to do this, which isn't ideal because that means I've got to build things, rebuild them, move a whole bunch of things around. It's going to take an awful long time. And it also means that every single vehicle that's not on the bottom row is going to be a contraption, and it's going to have a minecart sat underneath it, which makes it look all kind of stupid. Now, if I was to break that minecart, it just breaks everything underneath it, which is not ideal. But at least it's not an entity anymore. So there was me thinking I'd get all of this scrapyard done in one episode. Not gonna happen. But at least we've got that bit, which looks absolutely wonderful. So I guess I'll see you all after my holiday.